Hey YouTube, Project SB4 here with Jamie-san, and today in this episode we are looking at deck profile, which is Blastoise and Blastzel, most notably for being Blastzel. So what I'm going to do for you more advanced players is pretty much just go through the deck so you can kind of get the general profile, and then what I'll probably do is later on is look into the deck, kind of justification as to why I run some of the cards. I'm going to look into combos and how the deck plays, and also I want to look at this deck in the current format and just see how it generally test plays against most other decks. So with that aside, let's get to it. So guys, here's a deck. For the Pokemon lineup, we have 3 Squirtle. I run 2 Wartortle, 3 Blastoise, 2 Weasel, 2 Blastzel, 3 Cleffa, 2 Phanpy, and lastly 2 Donphan. For the trainers, we have 4 Pokemon Communication, 4 Rare Candy, 3 Switch, and 2 Plus Power. And lastly, for the supporters, we have 3 Collectors, 2 Elm, 3 Professor Oak, a single Judge, 1 Twins, and lastly a Seeker. And for the energy lineup, I go 9 Water Energy, 4 Double Colorless Energy, and lastly 4 Rainbow Energy. Okay guys, so let's look into how the deck works. So here we have Blastoise. This is the main beat stick for the deck. Hydro Launcher requires 2 Water Energy and a Double Colorless Energy. The text on Hydro Launcher reads, return 2 Water Energy attached from Blastoise to your hand. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon. This attack does 100 damage to that Pokemon, and it doesn't apply weaknesses or resistances for the bench Pokemon. So obviously the thing about Blastoise is it's got a high energy cost, which there are ways of exploiting it. So we look into Blastzel. So Blastzel's Water Acceleration reads, once during your turn before you attack, you may attach a Water Energy from your hand to Blastzel. So basically, what you're looking to do is you want to attach a Water Energy and then attach an additional water Energy to the Blastzel, meaning that when Blastoise is your active Pokemon, you can move those energies onto Blastoise, dealing 100 damage to whichever Pokemon you feel like. Another really important card I run in this deck is Cleffa. Cleffa is really good because of its Eek ability, which means that you can shuffle your hand to your deck and draw 6 cards, and then it puts Cleffa to sleep. Normally this would be a bad thing, however Cleffa's ability means that it prevents all damage being done by attacks from your opponent. So this works really well with Professor Oak's new theory. Now I run 3 copies of each of these, strictly because if you use the Professor Oak and then use the Cleffa, so you're pretty much really feeling out the stuff in your deck. Obviously Cleffa is not going to, the dice roll is never going to favour you, or the coin toss, whichever way you do it. However, I do run copies of Switch. And the reason why I run Switch is because when Cleffa is asleep on your turn, you can switch it out and then put it back in. So these are a really good combo, these 3 cards to put together. Some of the other cards that I'm playing in this deck include Pokemon Collector. Now this card's a staple in pretty much every deck. It allows you to search for 3 Pokemon and put them to your hand. So when you're playing Collector, you're probably most wanting to search out a Squirtle, which is kind of self-explanatory really. If you have a Double Colorless Energy in your hand, you're probably going to want to attach it to the Squirtle, meaning that by the time you get the Blastzel out, you will probably have 2 energies in hand and attach it to the Squirtle, whatever evolution it's at, so that by the time Blastoise is out, you want to be hitting with that Hydro Launcher. So some other cards that I play. I do play 4 Rare Candy. Now, as I'm sure you probably saw in the deck, I do play a lineup of 3-2-3 with the Blastoise, and there are 4 rare candies. The reason for this is strictly down to consistency. I want to make sure that I get a rare candy out ASAP, and I want to make sure that if one is misprized, that I will definitely draw one. The Blastoise is absolutely integral to this deck, and it's really important that you get it out. And lastly, Pokemon Communication. It will just search out any card in your deck for you, so it's a really, really important card to have. Some of the other cards I have in my deck, which I haven't really gone into much detail about. One of them being Judge. Judge is really good in this rotation. In the last format, I definitely went with Copycat over it, just because it gave you more cards in your hands. But however, in this rotation, I prefer Judge just mainly for the hand disruption. Judge reads that each player shuffles his hand into his deck and draws 4 cards. Also, it's a really good way of just replenishing your hand. Say you have 1 or 2 cards. Also, if you know your opponent has something in their hand that you want to get rid of, you can just play Judge and just get rid of it, basically. So, that's that. Seeker. Seeker is a good card. It was definitely better in the last rotation. However, I still play it because I do run a Donphan, and if there's a Cleffa on the bench, I don't want to knock out the Cleffa. Also, it's a really good way of healing your own Pokemon. And lastly, Twins. Twins is quite a situational card. It's basically, if you have more prizes than your opponent, you can take any 2 cards from your deck and put them to your hand. So this is really good if the situation plays in your favour. So one thing that I did bear in mind when I was building this deck is that it's not an Autolost to Zekrom. Let's have a quick look at Zekrom. It does have a weakness to fighting Pokemon, which is ×2, and also its Bulk Strike does do 40 damage to itself. Now, bearing in mind that when you are playing Blastoise and Floatzel, they both have lightning weaknesses, which means that it's ×2 damage. So you're looking at 240 damage, which is never really good. However, I'm sure when I was flicking through the deck, you probably did notice a Donphan in there. Now, Donphan does 60 damage with 1 energy, meaning that if you double that on a Zekrom, it will be 120. Also, another really good thing about Donphan is that it does have a resistance of -20, meaning it will do 20 less damage. On top of that, it has the Exoskeleton ability, which means any damage done to it is reduced by 20. So any damage that Zekrom will do to your Donphan will be reduced by 40. Also, if you can't knock it out in 1 turn, I do run a plus power in there, just so to make sure that you will knock it down. But the likelihood is anyway, is that by the time the Zekrom does get out, it probably would have attacked one of your Blastoise or your Floatzel. So it's done 40 damage to itself already. So by the time the Donphan does get in there, you can Earthquake for 120, which would normally knock it out. But saying that isn't the scenario, there is definitely the plus power in there for you anyway. Now, as I'm sure you're probably aware, I didn't run Fighting Energy in there. Instead, what I've got is I've got Rainbow Energy. Now, Rainbow Energy will do any energy you want onto the Donphan, but it will do 1 damage to it. Small price to pay, and definitely worth considering. One thing that I'd really urge you guys to be careful about is when having Donphan as your active Pokemon, Donphan's Earthquake will do 10 damage to all of your bench Pokemon. Now, this isn't usually a problem when, say, having someone like Blastoise on your bench, who does have high HP. However, if you do have a Cleffa there, remember a Cleffa only has 30 HP, so you don't want to knock it out and give your opponent a prize. So guys, we're reaching the conclusion now, and I kind of want to talk about this deck in the current format. There are several decks being played at the moment, however, I've kind of listed the top 5, which you're probably most likely to come across. So number 1, something we've already talked about, is Zekrom. Now, you shouldn't have too much problems having the Donphan as a side tech in there. However, providing the Zekrom can't donk you first turn, you should be okay. Another popular deck at the moment is Loscar. Loscar, for Blastoise's sniper potentials, if you can get Blastoise out as soon as possible, then you shouldn't really have too much problem against it. The Donphan itself has a weakness of ×2, so you shouldn't have a problem hitting that down too much. However, it's the Machamp you need to be worried about, because the Machamp does have 150 HP, which can often be hard for a Blastoise to hit it out. So basically what you want to do is you want to hit it down in the earlier stages, providing you get Blastoise out quick enough. Another really top tier deck at the moment is Reshiboar. Now, notably, Reshiboar is a fire type, so in theory it has a weakness to water of ×2, and Blastoise and Floatzel are both water types. Now, normally you would think you'd have the advantage, however, with that, Reshiram does hit for 120, and with a plus power it will knock out Blastoise. So the best thing to do is cut off its supply. You want to go for the Tepics before they get to the Emboar, and you want to hit down whatever draw power they have, whether that be in Magnezone or whether that be in the Ninetales. And lastly, for mirror matches, it's pretty much an even match. I don't really know what they're going to tech against, maybe if they're going to have another tech that's not Donphan. But either way, you shouldn't have too much problem, and it should be a fairly even match. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, subscribe if you like it, and catch you later. Peace.